Hello, and welcome to our first of two May 2023 NABBW Financial Podcasts. I'm here with regular guest Pam Sams to discuss tonight's hugely important topic, how financial literacy helps us reach our financial goals. Our official title is Financial Literacy 10 Steps to Get You Up to Speed. Pam tells me that last month, April, was Financial Literacy Month. And so, as we're going to learn here tonight, having a good grasp of this knowledge can actually improve our well being, according to research conducted earlier this year by an organization called Mind Over Money. Sadly, according to this same research that I discovered, our American financial literacy is declining despite excellent efforts, or so they say, excellent efforts by educators to provide financial education to high school and college age students. Overall, as the population is overall, their studies showed that 77% of Americans feel stressed and anxious about their finances. Now, as Pam is going to be discussing with us tonight, financial literacy has many facets, but to introduce our discussion, I'm simply going to go with this. Financial literacy is the knowledge that you need to be able to make smart money decisions. And this includes skills like knowing how to prepare a budget, knowing how and how much to save, being able to recognize favorable loan terms, understanding a loan's impact on credit, and having comfort with the principles of investing. In addition to allowing us to make informed financial decisions and avoid unnecessary debt, financial literacy allows us to knowledgeably plan for our retirement. Plus, when we are armed with the appropriate knowledge about how our finances work, we can avoid any number of financial pitfalls. And it allows us to sleep well at night, which is something that I know is important to Pam. But remember that ancient TV commercial that used to say, when you've got your health, you've got just about everything? Well, for tonight, I'd like to paraphrase that to say something like, when you are financially literate, you're able to achieve your life goals, such as saving for education or retirement. And knowing how to use debt responsibly and how to successfully run a financial organization, whether that operation is as simple as managing your personal household finances, or whether you opt for something larger than that, such as running a business. Of course, I really wouldn't dream of talking about financial literacy if I didn't have our awesome NABBW retirement planning associate, Pamela J. Sams, here with me tonight. And you can see her there on the left. Pam knows that those of us who want to sleep well at night and reduce our stress with money can build or maintain our financial knowledge by reading books, listening to podcasts, subscribing to financial publications, or more likely, the best way is talking with a financial expert. So that's why we're here with Pam tonight, as she is a well-recognized financial professional. But as I usually do, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Before Pam and I dive into our discussion, I need to properly introduce our call. So give me a second to do that.
Securities offered through Securities America Incorporated, a registered broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Incorporated, a SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Pamela Sams, investment advisor representative. Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies, Securities America Incorporated, and all other entities named are separate entities.
Okay, we're official now, Pam. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me once again. And two, like you said, one of two this month, really, to talk about some important topics. You know, financial literacy is always one of the things that I am a big proponent of in my community and across the country. So I am very glad we were able to talk about this tonight.
I am too, Pam. Now, I want to get right to our discussion because you have 10 points that you'd like to cover tonight. And let's begin by giving you a chance to give us a more proper definition. What is your definition of financial literacy?
Well, financial literacy is really the ability to manage your money. It's a personal skill that really can benefit you throughout your life. And it's really just what comes in, what goes out, how you manage your money, how you budget. Everything that deals with your money is where you need to focus in on in terms of financial literacy. And as you was explaining in your intro, is that unfortunately we're not doing a very good job of it as a country in terms of educating our people with their money early on in life. We go from, I always explain, you go from kind of your parents' house to kind of quasi being on your own. Maybe if you went to a college or institution there, and then all of a sudden you're out in the real world and nobody really told you about money, how it works, and how to manage it properly. So really the emphasis on financial literacy early, even as early as just learning with young people, as early as 5. Actually, develop your money habits probably between age 5 and 6. So if you can introduce money and financial literacy a little bit earlier on, hopefully you'll have some well adjusted people who know how to manage their money on an ongoing basis, both early and as well as in the future.
That's really important. And you made a very, in my case, a situation that I really lived through. I know I grew up, I went from my parents' house to going to college. And before I graduated from college, I got married. And then when I got divorced, I decided that I need to be able to live on my own. I need to know that I can live on my own. So I said to myself, now that I didn't want to get divorced, but I am, I'm going to give myself at least 5 years that I am going to be an adult and live on my
Mhm.
own and prove to myself that I can do it. And I did live through it, and uh, it was a bumpy ride. So I really recognize that we do need to do a better job of training people young about how to manage money, and that goes for the thing we always talk about, budgeting, but also investing and taxes. And but I'll let you get to that. Your second point that you wanted to start with is talking about savings.
Yeah. So with the financial literacy, of course, comes with the money that comes in, but how much are you actually saving? Because a lot of, I think recently, because due to inflation and since the pandemic, the number is fairly high of people living paycheck to paycheck. I did a presentation a few weeks ago. It's probably north of 50%, even actually 60% of people living paycheck to paycheck, which means they're not saving. So the important part of being financially sound and stable and literate with your money is really to see if you're able to put away some money if you can. I know a
Hmm.
lot of times people go, well, that's a challenge, Pam. I need to pay my bills. I need to, buy food. I need to do all of these things. And unfortunately, that's where people fall short, is that they emphasize kind of those things. I'm a big proponent of paying yourself first if you can, even if it's something that you peel off $5, $10, something that you can develop a habit of saving and paying yourself, because you're just as important as the creditors and your bills and all of those things, is to really put something aside for that if you can. That may be, getting a side job or doing something that you're able to bring in a little bit more income in order to save if you need to, if you're living paycheck to paycheck. But if you're able to put aside something on a month-to-month basis, even if it's small, that's where you really need to develop that savings habit to make sure you're financially sound, or at least be on track to being financially well.
Hmm. And then hand in hand with having the savings, uh, your next point comes along, and that is having an emergency fund.
Yeah. So, every conversation I talk about cash reserves and emergency funds or rainy day fund or whatever you want to call it. But it's the ability to try to save a little bit of an egg nest, not nest egg for the future, but something that you can tap into if something happens in an emergency situation. So you're not relying on credit cards. A lot of times, if we have emergency pops up, we we tend to reach for the plastic and we try to pay for it for that. But if you're able to develop an emergency fund, the rule of thumb is about 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses in cash, just in case you get laid off or you're downsized or an emergency pops up where you need to repair the car or something happens.
Hmm.
that you can tap into this particular fund versus using your credit cards. So if you're again, 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses could be a daunting number for some people. My philosophy is how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Definitely really start with where you are, even if you have to put aside a little bit. If you can develop then maybe just 1 month of living expenses and then try to build upon that. We've just finished with tax season, and a lot of people got tax refunds, hopefully. And if
Hmm.
people got tax refunds, perhaps that could be a way to generate some cash or at least um, spark some of the cash reserve or putting that away for cash reserve into a checking or savings account, well, more like a savings account for that. So sometimes the tax refund is a forced savings and it could, like I said, jumpstart your emergency fund for that. So those people who are out listening, hopefully you haven't spent your tax refund
Hmm.
yet, and you can put it
Exactly.
aside to jumpstart your emergency fund. But that's one of the necessary parts of saving. And if you need to do the every year, I mean, the philosophy is you need to basically try to break even with the government, so you're not getting too much of a big a refund back. But sometimes people, it's a forced savings for people when they like it, and it's able to put aside or maybe pay down some debt or something like that. But I'm a big proponent of if you're able to put that aside to jumpstart your emergency fund, at least every year you have a little bit of a refund that you can do that with.
Well, I've heard so many people say that, that's what they want to have a nice big refund for.
Hmm.
But the thing that I think that you would tell these people that you haven't said yet is that the Uncle Sam doesn't pay you any interest on that money.
That's
So
correct. Yeah.
uh,
Hmm.
so if you have it
Yeah.
in some other kind of situation that you have control of, it
Yeah.
could actually have a chance to grow, not just be a lump sum that they flat give you
Yeah.
with no uh, benefit for the fact that they're
With no benefit, yeah, with no benefit. And the thing about it is that it's actually it's your money. It's
hmm
not
right,
like they're giving it to you. It's money that you had. They took too much, and they're just
right.
basically giving it back to you. So that's the thing. If you can capture that throughout the year, if you're disciplined enough, that's why. Like I said, I have some clients who like the forced savings because they may not be disciplined throughout the year to capture that and then put it away for it
Hmm.
to grow with interest. That this may be a way to do that. But like I said, the best case scenario is if you can say not pay as much to Uncle Sam, giving it
Hmm.
interest-free loan and then spitting it back to you with no interest. If you're able to capture that throughout the year and adjusting your withholding so you can break even and then take more home in your paycheck so you can invest it on your own.
All right. And number four on your list, and I know we have to talk about this every call, and it's important because
It's
people need to
important.
hear it. And
Uh-huh.
that, of course, for people that watch us all the time, know it's budgeting. So let's talk about budgeting, Pam.
Yeah, yeah, budgeting it goes hand in hand with, how much you're saving and then also, putting away your cash reserve. But the money coming in and out of your household, what are you spending money on? And then are there areas that you're overspending? And then some categories that you can reduce if you need to. So really
Hmm.
looking at your what are you spending money on? So you'll have your fixed expenses and you'll have your variable expenses. So your fixed expenses are those things that aren't, just as it says, fixed, that's not going to move. Your mortgage, generally your car note. If there's people out there who still have student loans, probably that, or any fixed expenses that won't move. And then you have your variable expenses. There's groceries going to be in there, and you'll have, you know, um, clothing, haircuts, all of that stuff falls onto your variable expenses. And so you have to kind of see where those resources are. And then if you're spending too much, hopefully there's areas that you can reduce, eliminate, or at least curb in order
Hmm.
to put you in alignment with your budget. So I go through this exercise that I tell people to kind of do this T chart on what's your fixed expenses, what's your variable, those things that can move, and are there areas that you may be overspending or what I call the wants as well, because some things that you're gonna need, you need food, shelter, transportation, but on the other side, there's wants, and I wanna, buy, tickets to go to the opera, I wanna do this sort of thing. But if it's not in your budget, perhaps you don't do those all the time. Maybe that's a special occasion type of thing. And then you try
Hmm.
to capture as much of your income as you can with that. So it's some hard choices that you do have to make. And a lot of times with people with budgets, is that it's think of it more as being deprived of something. And it's really not. It's really making sure you're working within the parameters, you're living within your means, that you're not overspending and you're spending wisely on the things that you have to spend money on. So really going through those fixed and variable expenses really helps to put together a well planned budget. And then if there's or you see that you may be running a little bit short or there's more month than money, then that's where you start going to the variable and the variable slash wants category to see if there's ways that you can reduce or eliminate certain things or even forego for a certain period of time. I know,
Hmm.
sometimes you have things in your budget and you can say, okay, maybe if I didn't have streaming or cable or whatever for a few months, and sometimes they will suspend you for a little bit and then you can call them back and you can put it back on, but maybe 3 or 4 months you go without that in order to, save a little bit from that. So again, some hard choices if you need to, if you're running up against it, running short or breaking even every year, every month on your budget. There may be some things that you need to adjust to make sure that you're living within your means.
And such good advice that is. When I first started that 5 years of living by myself, I knew what all my fixed expenses were and I made a budget and it all balanced with what my income was, but I forgot about the variable expenses. And that was a rude awakening. That was where I said the part started being bumpy, but I learned from it, Pam. So at least I'm
Mhm.
still here. But
Yes, you
anyway,
are.
right. Point number five is credit.
Yeah. We're in a world where credit is, they say the dollar is king, credit is king in this in this country. And if
Hmm.
you don't have proper use, if you either abused it or you just don't have enough or don't have even a history, it's really hard put. If you go rent a hotel or a car or whatever, they're going to ask you for, credit or credit card. So really making sure that you're eligible.
Hmm.
And if you do have your credit card, make sure if you do have open lines of credit, make sure you're responsible with credit as well. So, and it's really funny because with my kids and they're now in their, mid 20s or so, and probably hanging around me a whole lot.
Yeah.
They're so afraid of, getting that first credit card because they hear me talking about, in these presentations similar to this about, credit and making sure you're responsible and they're like, oh, that sounds like, daunting a lot. So they just forayed into getting their first credit card and they're, doing the responsible things with them. But sometimes, getting that first one is a little bit of a challenge because, you may be a little bit afraid of how it works, but at least getting it and then making sure you're responsible and establishing some type of credit. The credit works in a couple of different ways. There's what they call consumer debt, which are your credit cards. You have loans, you have mortgages, and the credit bureaus kind of look at your score in a couple of different ways on how you're using certain categories. So, the percentage of what your income is to your what you're spending on your mortgage or what you have for loans, student loans, personal loans, auto loans, those sort of things are scored. And then, of course, your consumer debt as well. But really, making sure you're responsible for it. Sometimes even having people spend um, cash a lot differently than they do plastic.
Hmm.
So if you know that it's a challenge with keeping your credit limit, or at least the balance on your credit card fairly high, maybe sometimes you use a debit card, or maybe sometimes you use cash and you only use your credit card on an emergency kind of situation with that. That's the thing about, unfortunately, be on my soapbox for a little bit, is that, we're a society of instant gratification. And so sometimes we like, okay, I'll just put it on credit and then I'll figure it out uh, pay it later. But it's,
Hmm.
back to that savings and that building up the emergency fund or cash reserve, is that, are there ways to um, really save for that particular big expense versus putting it on plastic? You do have to have a certain amount of credit, of course, in this country, in order to, get certain things. But if there's big ticket items that you could save up for, perhaps, maybe you have a different strategy for that. Same thing if you do have balances on your credit cards, have a game plan on how you're going to pay it off efficiently. That's what happens a lot of times during the holidays, and we get into the exuberance of the holidays, and we want to give
Hmm.
everybody gifts and all of that. And then January comes and the bill comes, and then we don't have a way to pay it down, or haven't thought about how you're going to effectively pay it down. So if you are going to charge, be responsible and know exactly how you're going to pay down your debt as well, because it's going to be there, because you don't want to ruin your credit a good credit history, or avoid, and you want to make sure you develop good borrowing habits with your credit cards.
One thing I've noticed that's changed over my time of being an adult is uh, the grocery situation. When I first started buying groceries, I would go there with cash or a check. But I really liked during uh, the COVID time the concept of being able to order my groceries in advance and just go pick them
Hmm.
up. I,
Yeah.
I continue to do that, but you
Hmm.
have to pay for those groceries in advance with your credit card.
Yeah. Hmm.
So so I have changed, to my buying of groceries habits now comes on a credit card, but I put it on just one credit card that I make sure that I
Hmm.
pay off every month. So that's
Exactly. Yeah.
that's I've just kind of substituted, I think, the checkbook for this particular credit card. So I just know that, this is the card I use to
Hmm.
buy groceries and it has to get paid off every month. So,
Exactly. And with those particular things, the way I do it is that I know I'm gonna, use that credit card, and then, it just, as if I was gonna use cash, go ahead and just transfer that particular amount to the credit card. So if that means
mhm,
I paid a little bit earlier, that also affects, if you pay your, a little tip that most people don't know about credit cards, is that if you pay within a billing cycle and you have kind of two payments, it can actually affect your credit score a little bit and enhance it. So what I do is kind of make multiple payments. So if I go to because it has to have the attachment for the credit card for the groceries, because I'm still kind of doing that too, is that
mhm,
I'll go ahead, like if I had went to the store with cash, go ahead and transfer that, let's say $200 or $300 to the credit card that
mhm.
I would have spent if I
Right,
was in the store as credit,
right.
as cash. Hmm.
Mhm. But that is something that I have had to learn new in this past
Yes.
few years. So and
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of
and
people work a lot differently within this whole COVID period. We've learned a
right,
lot of different things that we had to do.
right, right. Okay, well, so the next point on your list is a scary one and really important for us to talk about, and that is identity theft.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing, especially during this time period where uh, cyber attacks are just known. I mean, I think I heard
Hmm.
something the other day about something happened in Dallas where there was a cyber attack on some things. And then during COVID, it was really crazy because, everybody was at home, everybody was on their computer, and also The unsavories didn't have anything better to do, probably. So,
Right. Yes.
so identity theft is really big. So making sure that you're responsible, never sharing your social security number with anybody outside of, when you're applying for credit, know where you're applying for credit at, that they're reputable. And so you don't want to do that. And if you are a victim of it, making sure you freeze your credit, your credit cards right away, and also your credit report, so they don't have access to it as well. There's a lot of different things going on. There's whole, people taking people's identity and then developing whole credit cards and whole mortgages and all kind of things. So you just want to be as cautious as possible when you do give out your personal information. So never give it out over the phone. There's a lot of financial scams and fraud going on, especially with seniors, where people are calling and they're asking, or are they saying they're from certain institutions like the IRS or whatever, and then unfortunately, um, sensitive information is passed along, and then that's what happens with either scamming and identity fraud and theft from that. So make sure you have your antennas up in
Hmm.
terms of, if it doesn't feel right in your gut or sound right, then make sure that you get the information from them and you call them back versus giving information right away with that. So identity theft is really a big thing. Cyber attacks, there's so many cards that have been compromised if you're in the store. And then next thing you know, you have fraudulent charges and you got to get a new card. But just being diligent as you can. I know sometimes you fall victim and it's not to any fault of your own, because people are getting really savvy with how they're doing these things. They're doing skiffs and scams and phishing and all of this stuff. And sometimes, you fall victim to it. Just make sure you're aware that, just close all of the, you know, contact your institutions where you have all of your credit cards. Make sure you freeze those right away, your credit report. Contact the Social Security Administration, all of that, to make sure that they're not. Well, I think they'll lock down your Social Security number as well, or they'll lock down because I had a client try to contact to get information about their Social Security benefits, and they couldn't get information because they have been a victim of identity theft. So you do have to physically go into the office and all of that. So they are, aware, and they try to protect you as much as they can with that. But try to, you unfortunately, it's part of our environment now. The
Hmm.
identity theft is out there. Just make sure you protect yourself at all costs and don't fall for some of these scams. There's a lot of financial scams going out, like I said, especially with seniors. So just be cautious when it comes to the information that you give out.
Very good for us to keep in mind. Number 7 on your list after identity theft is financial goals.
Yeah. So, with anything with your financial plan, you have goals that you want to achieve. So there could be short-term goals, it could be kind of intermediate, midterm goals, and then long-term goals. So depending on where you are in your life cycle, that could
Right.
be retirement, it could be sending kids to college, it could be saving for your new home, buying your dream house or your dream car. So really outlining, what do you want to do, what is your goal, and then um, a time horizon, and then also, how much it's going to cost you, because basically that's what financial planning is what do I want to achieve, and then how much it's going to
Hmm.
cost, and then how do I need to start saving for it. So really having a realistic expectation. I always follow the SMART goals, making sure your goals are specific and measurable and attainable and realistic, and then time bound. So the realistic part of that, the R part of the SMART goals.
Hmm.
So if you're trying to retire within the next 5 to 10 years, but you only have $50,000 saved, may not be very realistic.
Right.
So the financial goals that you do put in place, really trying to put maybe working with a professional to kind of see what the numbers look like on what do you need to do to achieve the goals, and then are you willing and are you able to put aside the resources in order to get to the goals? Because a lot of times there's numbers that are produced. Is it going to be realistic? Is it attainable? Sometimes, but sometimes it also takes some sacrifice as well. So that's why I said, are you willing to do it? You can be able, but are you willing to do it? And so
Okay.
that's where it comes down to your financial goals with that. So when I do retirement planning, for example, for clients, I was like, okay, how willing are you to move the needle on if 65 is not your number, are you willing to go up a couple of years or even to 70 in order to make that more realistic for you? Or are you willing to put more money at it to get to your goals? So there's a variety of different ways to influence a financial goal number, but it also comes down to the person being willing and able to do so.
All right. Well, then the next list of points that we need to become um, more literate about financially is investing. Number 8 on your list.
Yeah, so that goes kind of hand in hand with the financial goals. So anytime that you have your financial goals, you have your kind of your regular savings, but anything above savings, that's where investing comes into play. So, how long do you have to invest? How much money do you have to invest? What are the parameters? Are you conservative? Are you moderate? Are you kind of more aggressive? If this is your first time investing, a lot of times people are really um, want to be a little bit cautious when they start because they hear all of this, the talking heads on the news talking about how bad things are or the stock market did this or that. So sometimes it scares people a little bit when they first get started, but really knowing, kind of your risk tolerance, and then are you willing to also learn from it. So as an
Hmm.
investor, you do need to make sure you're aware of what certain types of investments are. There's mutual funds, there's exchange traded funds, there's regular stocks, there's a variety of bonds, there's a variety of different things that you can invest in. Just knowing what are your back kind of going back to your financial goals. How do you need to be invested based on how much you're going to need for that particular goal, and then how long you're going to need to invest will kind of dictate where you need to put your money as well. But investing on your own, if you invest on your own, definitely make sure you're educated. So reading some good books or blogs or podcasts would be sufficient. If you can't do it on your own, really seeking the help of a professional that may be able to kind of walk you through what do you need to do for investing as well, and what are your goals, what is your risk tolerance, and then looking at how much you need to put aside for your particular goal, and then where you need to invest from that. But past the savings, you need to start investing if you want to grow your money. A lot of times, with dealing with boomers and probably even the generation before that, it wasn't a whole lot of, they kind of went through the depression and, what happened with the stock market. So a lot of, that generation didn't invest, including my parents. They had nice savings account in the bank, and during that time, CDs were paying a lot, so they probably had some CDs and savings, but never really invested because they just didn't trust the system. But um, and then that could have been just because not being educated properly in what they could have done with
Hmm.
investing. So really seeking the guidance if you need it, and then also educating yourself as well. But in order to grow your money, investing is the main component versus savings. You can build in savings, but unfortunately now maybe a little bit because the interest rates are ticking up a little bit, and you can get some fairly good rates on CDs and money market and savings account. But for the longer term investing, you need you need your money to grow. So investing would be a way to do that.
Hmm. Yes, I've been starting to get postcards and um, other information coming to me about um, banks and credit unions and things that are trying
Hmm.
to tell me that I can get 5%. But
Yeah.
what I've been frustrated about is it says they'll give me this 5% for like 180 days, and then I want to know. So then, what do I get after
Yeah,
180
and
days? You know,
I know. What do you get after
because
that?
yeah, because I'm not gonna just give you couple thousand, $20,000 or something, when I don't know what's going to happen after that short
Mhm.
period when I'm going to get 5% on it. So,
Yeah, it's a lot of teaser rates out there now. That the rates have gone up, but like you said, what's going to happen after that? That time period. Am I back to point 0.001 or
right,
am I back?
right,
So you need to know that as well. But yes, that's where focusing on what do you need to have in place, and then research before you. I guess research before you leap.
right. And number nine on your list, I can't remember if it's Ben Franklin, but somebody said there's only two things certain in life, and one is death, and the other is taxes.
Taxes,
So
yeah. Uh-huh.
number nine on your list is taxes.
Yes, 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 yes. And I think it was probably death and taxes. Yeah, we just can't get past that particular thing. So we just finished with well, for most of us, we finished with tax season. People who file for extensions, you have a few more months to deal with the dreaded T word. But
Hmm.
for the most part, really looking at what your tax structure looks like. Are you paying, kind of, nobody wants to pay more, but are you paying kind of your fair share? And then are you taking advantage of, some of the tax law changes that occurred? I think we talked about it briefly in one of the calls earlier in the year, but Secure Act 2.0 was
Hmm.
passed in December of 2022, had a lot of different things that affected mainly retirement type of accounts and plans. There a different um, age for RMDs a little bit later on, that they'll be moving up to 75 within the next few years for people who grandfathered in I believe, who turned this year, I think it's 73. It was 72. Before that, it was 70 and a half. So the number is
Okay,
progressively
creeping up.
creeping
Right.
up. And then eventually, I
Hmm.
think it's in 2025, it'll be 75. And that's kind of the number. Hopefully, that's the number. But while you kind of stepping back a little bit when you're investing, is that in certain investments will also have certain tax treatments. So as you're starting to put together your overall financial plan with your financial goals and maybe some of the short term, medium term, and long term, is where do you put your investments, but also what are the taxability parts of your investments as well. Because when you get to, let's say, retirement, for example, your nest egg, if you have everything into a pre-tax bucket like your 401k or your IRAs that haven't been taxed yet, then that's going to be a certain tax treatment. That's going to be a taxable event versus if you had the investments in, let's say, a Roth or something that give you tax-free income in the future. So knowing where your investments are in the tax diversification. You've probably heard of investment diversification, but there's also tax diversification
Okay.
on how certain accounts are taxed. So knowing that as you're putting together your overall financial plan as well will save you money, hopefully in the future with taxes from that. And then, just from the day to day, are there areas that you could take advantage of, adjusting if you're still working, adjusting your W-4 if you're taking home if you're getting too big of a refund, maybe bringing some of that back into your household on an annual basis or paycheck to paycheck versus getting that lump
Hmm.
sum. And then so it was RMDs. There's a 529 stipulation in there. So if people hit and back to the Secure Act 2.0, that is. So people who have money in 529 plans, if their child hasn't used all of it, by the time they're finished with education, you can actually roll that over into a Roth IRA for them. That's coming down the pike, I believe, next year
Hmm.
sometime. So there's a variety of different, taxable things, tax um, tax things that are inside of Secure Act 2.0 that may be beneficial for some people. So definitely do your homework on that, read about it. It's probably, a whole Bible full of stuff if you want to parcel through it, or guess kind of get the highlights, or check with your tax accountant or your financial professional. They'll kind of walk you through some of the areas that may pertain to your situation, so you don't have to read the whole book or the whole
Okay.
legislation of it, because
Okay.
it's quite lengthy.
All right. Number 10 is a thing that I have been hearing my fellow boomers talking about more and more lately, and I think it's we must be getting to an age where we're really starting to think about it, and that is legacy planning.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's has come up quite a bit on my end as well. Working with a lot of boomer clients, and then them dealing with kind of their parents as well, or right, and kind of in the throes of really dealing with legacy planning, and funeral planning and life insurance and long-term care. It's a lot of things that are involved with that. But that's part of kind of this financial literacy track, or your financial journey is really what's going to happen at the end.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, you have to kind of think about that too, because you don't want to leave too much of a mess for people when, like, some people go, well, I'm not going to be here.
Right.
But you don't want to do that to the people you leave behind. So really making sure things are in an orderly fashion. So if you need to, put something in a will, something in writing, who's going to get certain things, what's going to happen to my assets, do I want the house paid off, do things need to be in trust, or who's going to be executors, all of these decisions that you do need to make on that. Same thing, kind of going back to the tax part of that, are
Hmm.
certain investments taxable? How is that going to play out in a legacy plan? Because if somebody inherits a particular asset that, kind of going back to that Secure Act 2.0, they, I think in the original Secure Act, they eliminated what they call the stretch IRA provision. So now, if someone inherits an IRA, they have basically 10 years to take all of the distributions out of that, versus the stretch that they had previous years where you can keep it basically for your lifetime. So knowing that in your legacy plan, if you have someone who's going to inherit an IRA, a larger IRA, you have to deal with their. You at least need to let them know that it's going to be a taxable situation on their behalf for at least 10 years that they're dealing with that. So
Hmm.
you want to do some pre-planning, as well. So do you transition some of those, particular assets into a tax-free type of situation, like a Roth, earlier before you do it? So there's a variety of different things to think about as you're doing your legacy planning. But kind of back to kind of the players that you have in that is really, who can make those decisions for you. So making the choice on who wants to be the executor, who's going to make the financial decisions, but also your medical directives that are
Hmm.
involved, with your medical care. That could be two different people. Some people are good with money. Some people are good with making other decisions. Sometimes
Right.
it's too stressful of a situation for one person, one particular person. In my own family, my oldest sister was originally executor for my mom after my dad passed away, but that was a heavy burden. She was like, I can do it, but it's too stressful. So then one of my other sisters took that part up, and then I dealt with more of the financial piece of it. So, picking the players as well,
Hmm.
and
Right.
interviewing them and letting them know. Just don't put them on documents, and then all of a
Hmm.
sudden it's like, hey, by the way, I made you executor of my estate.
Right.
You don't want to surprise anybody,
No, no,
so you
no. That's
want
not.
to you yeah, you don't want to do that. So you want to interview, you want to be selective, you want to have the conversation beforehand, but that's all part of that legacy planning on all of the decisions that need to be made in the transition from, with your assets kind of at the end of your financial journey. So you don't want to leave it to chance. You want to make sure you put something in place. Because, without having some documentation, you leave your relatives in a big quandary, and a lot
Hmm.
of unfortunately debates and what
Right.
would have happened and what did you want and what you didn't want and all of that. You don't want to leave it to interpretation, so you want to make sure it's tidy and that it's in a written document.
Excellent. Well, that's the end of your 10 points that you wanted to cover. And I have a question for you.
Hmm.
Um, while I was doing my, I always do a little bit of research prior to our podcast, so I get to know a little bit about what we might be going to talk about. And
Hmm.
today, when I was finishing up my editing of what I wanted to talk about today, I discovered there's actually a game online that I wanted to know if you've ever heard about. It's sponsored by Invesco QQQ. Well, I've heard of Invesco. I didn't
Hmm.
know there anything about the three Qs afterwards, but it's Invesco QQQ and the NCAA. Yes, the
Hmm.
National Collegiate Athletic Association, and
Hmm.
this game is called How Not to Suck at Money.
Yeah, I think
And
I have heard of that. Yes.
it's online at hntsam.com, which is How Not to
Yes.
Suck at Money
Yes. I don't know. Yep.
acronym. And so apparently it's been created as a way to help college students who are U.S. residents to
Hmm.
become financially literate. And I
Yeah.
didn't try to play it, but I was wondering if you had heard of it or if you have any suggestions about how we as parents and grandparents can help our young people with becoming financially literate. Do you think a game like this would be a thing that would
Hmm.
be worth working on?
Yes, I have. Now that you mentioned it, I have heard of that site before. Because a lot of institutions, colleges, and actually some high schools around the country. You read in the papers, you'll start seeing certain states to make it mandatory that at least have some type of personal finance class prior to graduation, and so a lot of universities are also doing that as well. And in my research, kind of doing this for this particular podcast as well, I ran into a really good resource from Harvard that put together a really good track for financial literacy after their students graduate from college. So, yes, definitely any information that young people can get their hands on and start learning early. So games like that, or website, or podcasts, how not to suck at money, or any
Yeah.
of these books would definitely
Hmm.
be a good resource for developing or strengthening financial literacy for young
Hmm.
people.
Well, I thought the name of it would, sounds kind of
Yes.
fun, not to suck, but
Yes, yes, that's
yeah,
definitely a young term. It's like how not to
right,
suck
yes,
at money.
right.
Yeah, but yeah, if you can get it early, that's fine. With I mentioned, my two young guys that happen to work for me as well, is that the adulting piece, even though they know a lot, it's still in the
Hmm.
beginning, learning how to pay bills for yourself and, not relying on your parents and some of the things that you know, who teaches you about, okay, now you got to file your taxes? Nobody ever really lets you know that. Or
Hmm.
now I have to, in our particular state, we have personal property tax. So when is that due? When do I have to pay
Hmm.
personal property tax? Now that I had to have the conversation with my oldest son, he'll be turning 25, but next year he'll be off of our health insurance. And so I had to tell him about
Right.
now you got to start shopping around for health insurance. So
He said,
it's a
"Oh, thanks,
lot of,
Mom." Yeah,
yeah,
right,
yeah, thanks. But at least I gave him a year
right.
time period to kind of think about it. But a lot of these things that if you don't know about them, then all of a sudden, you're at a loss or don't know how to do it, or you didn't know you needed to, can get
Hmm.
you in trouble. So really just knowing how, I probably, we should probably have a resource called Adulting 101 or something
Right. Yes.
where, after you get out, these are certain things you need to think about with your money as you start to earn, putting some away, the things, the bills that you hadn't been used to before, and now you have
Right.
to start paying for, all within still trying to make sure you're saving and investing and all of those sort of things. It can be quite daunting and adulting.
Hmm. Yes, I've just started hearing that word in the last year or so, and I think it's a kind of a cool word. Yeah,
Yes, it is kind
adulting.
of a cool word. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Sometimes I tell my kids too, I was like, I don't want to adult today either, but
Right. Yeah.
we just need to,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right. All right. Well, anything else that you've thought of that we should cover here?
Um, I wanted to kind of go back to that credit score situation because I don't think I really talked about it. So I talked about credit, but credit scores, I just wanted to let people know with credit, it's really making sure you keep a clean credit, but you have the three credit bureaus. You have TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. You're allowed to get your credit report, an annual credit report, at least once a year from each of the three credit bureaus, just to know what's on your credit. And I know we've talked about this quite a bit in previous calls, but you don't want to be surprised when you go to ask for credit. You want to know what's on your credit before
Right.
you show up, because having a denial or being unfortunately embarrassed perhaps at the car dealership or at some place where you're applying for credit and not knowing something is adverse on your credit report could be uh, you don't want that surprise. Let's say that.
No.
So pulling one at least once a year. They're going to give you what's on the report. They won't give you the scores though. They still charge for that. But there's a lot of credit monitoring type of accounts, or I'm sorry, subscriptions that you can do if you want them. They are ongoing, but it will let you know if something comes on your credit report. They do cost month to month for that. Sometimes, if unfortunately, if you have been compromised, the card will give you like maybe a 12 months or 18 months of free credit monitoring. So take advantage of that.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, if you had, I've been compromised, unfortunately, twice with some stores or whatever, and I've gotten some free credit monitoring for a while for that. But back to your scores. So we're really looking at keeping your score. It's somewhere between 350 and 850. You don't want to be on the 350. You want to be closer to 850 if you can.
Hmm.
And then usually keeping that up based on your credit and your payment history, how much credit you have extended, how much you're using. So you want to keep your credit utilization score under 30%, and then also what types of credit that you have. So a variety, like a mortgage or a car loan or a credit card. They kind of your credit score is made up, comprised of a variety of different credit components on different types of credit that you have. But you want to get your annual credit report at least once a year, and then if you want to get your scores prior to going out to apply for credit to know at least what the score is. Um, Getting a composite credit score because you'll get a credit score from each of the bureaus. Sometimes they're skewed a little bit, some may be a little bit lower. They're never the same number,
Right.
unfortunately. So you want a composite score. It's called a Vantage 3 score. That's usually what most lenders or creditors will look at as an Vantage 3 score, which is a composite of all three of the credit bureaus from that. So I just wanted to kind of circle back and dig a little bit deeper into that credit score, credit
Hmm.
report thing.
Well, it is important. I remember when Steve and I moved to Galena, the community that we've lived in now for almost 20 years, and we went to a national bank that's here in
Mhm.
Galena to open our, uh, you know, banking accounts when we moved to town, and we discovered that somebody had stolen his
Mm,
credit that he didn't know
mhm,
until they said we cannot take you as a customer because you've
mhm.
defaulted on 10 cars. And we're going,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
what are you talking about?
Mhm.
That was, and no one had actually communicated with us. No one had, it hadn't caught up with the real Steve Holmes yet.
Yeah.
But so it was a real shock when we think that the bank is going to say, "We're happy to have you," and instead they say, "No,
No,
we're
wow,
we're a,
yeah.
we're a U.S. bank, a national bank, and
Mhm.
we can't work with you." So
Oh
we ended
gosh.
up working with a state bank,
Yeah.
because they are
Mhm.
not quite as um, rule oriented, I guess.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it was such a shock. So it is something that you
Yeah.
have to keep track of.
Yeah, you gotta keep track of it, and that's why how you can catch some of these identity theft situations, as well. If you know what's on your credit report and, you're like, "Hey, that's not mine. There's a whole credit
Hmm.
card out here that I have no
Right.
idea." So really keeping up with what's on your credit report could catch some of these identity theft, situations, as well. And if you do have erroneous, you kind of thought about when you were talking about, two similar names. Sometimes if there's a same name, it
Right.
could their credit situation could appear on yours. So you want to make sure that it is matching your name is with your social, that
Hmm.
they don't have a whole different, Pamela Sams or something on
Right.
on it,
Right.
for
Right.
that. So that's why having, unfortunately, I think I had, um, a client, she hadn't applied for credit and because she didn't need to, in like 10 or 15 years. And then she went to, and unfortunately there was something on there that was not hers, was somebody with a similar name, that's where it was appearing. Yeah, you do still have to, even if you're not applying for credit, just know what's going on. You may be able to
Hmm.
catch some of those identity theft situations, for that. And then definitely, if you are applying for credit, know ahead of time before you start
Right.
applying what your
Right.
credit score is and what's on your credit report.
Well, Steve was so shocked because there was a time when he went to buy his first car, and they went to check his credit at the car dealership. And after they checked his credit, they said, "You could have any car on this lot." So he was used to having stellar credit. So
Yes, yes.
so the shock to discover that
Mm-hmm.
somebody, a bank, would say, "No, we don't want to work with you."
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
quite startling. But enough
definitely.
of my stories. I'll
No.
just say, as usual, it's been great talking to you,
Hmm.
Pam, and
Yes.
thank you, of course, for being
Hmm.
my guest and for providing us with this great checklist about the things that we need to work toward to be financially literate and why we need to be financially literate, and telling us that it is unfortunate that as a nation we are not as literate
Hmm.
as we could be or might have been at one time. So I appreciate you recommending this topic and for offering this advice. And as we said at the top of this call, our next discussion will be on May 18th, Thursday the
Hmm.
18th. It's only in a couple of weeks from now. So
Yep.
um, you and I have had a little bit of a discussion about what we might be
Hmm.
talking about, but I don't think we've finalized it. So
Yeah.
I won't announce what we're talking about yet.
Okay.
But now, audience, uh, uh, thanks for joining us for this great call with Pamela Sams. And if you have any questions after the call, please feel free to email them to Pamela@jacksonsams.com. I usually spell that
Hmm.
JACKSONSAMS.com, or go to our website, www.jacksonsams.com. And of course, if you'd like to know more about the National Association of Baby Boomer Women, we have a website at nabbw.com and a Facebook page at facebook.com/nabbw. So
Hmm.
that's about all for tonight. But thank you, Pam, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
our audience for joining us.
All right. Good night.
Good night.